it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. Thanks so much for all the PlayStation Network friend requests this week. I put my PSN in a couple videos ago. It must have been like a month ago at this point, but you guys blew the previous record out of the water. I might be maxing out my PSN friends list if you guys keep adding me like this. As far as what I'm playing goes this weekend, I'm back on my bullshit, back on Need for Speed Unbound. I know this game is not liked by a lot of people, but I'm old and I grew up playing Need for Speed Most Wanted, and you know, it feels like Most Wanted. It takes place in this fictionalized Chicago. I don't like the soundtrack, I don't like the racing effects, but it feels really good to play, so sue me. It's on sale for 20 bucks on the PlayStation Network right now. If you haven't played it, I recommend it if you grew up with Need for Speed games like I did and you missed the days of the black box titles. Anyway, in today's video, I've got 4 topics to cover. The first one has to do with this mobile platform Sony is building. It could be giving us hints into the future of PlayStation from a hardware and software perspective. Next up, Sony just did their annual business meeting where they talk about the future of the company, and there was a few PlayStation tidbits in there, like a new controller that looks awesome, but I don't think will ever come to reality. Third on the list, Neil Druckmann is getting shit on once again, and it's getting harder to defend him, but I'm going to do my best. And finally, a verified leaker says the next PS5 exclusive is going to be revealed very soon, so we're going to take a guess at what it is. So let's jump into this first news story here, which is all about Sony's future and their endeavors in trying to get on other platforms. This could be a situation where a chunk of that $11 billion they've dedicated to spending on games could be used, and unfortunately, it's in mobile games. This honestly is a very similar situation to the Xbox Game Pass versus PS Plus Extra and Premium situation that we were in a couple of years ago, where Xbox completely changed their whole business model and invented this thing called Game Pass, where at the beginning, some like old third-party games and a lot of first-party Xbox games would be available on this like Netflix style subscription service. They went all in on it and put all of their first-party stuff day one on it, and it backed Sony into a corner where their investors and their shareholders were like, hey, you guys need to respond to this with something similar. So we got the whole revamped PSN that has 2 extra tiers, Extra and Premium. It of course made Essential like noticeably worse than the other 2, which sucked on its own, but then we got a price increase very soon after that across the board with all 3 tiers, and the only one ironically I felt was justified was PS Plus Essential, just because it hadn't gotten a price increase since it was revamped for the PlayStation 4, so they earned it there. The other 2, I don't think so. I like the library on PS Plus Extra. I think it's got some high quality games in it. It's just not worth the price that they're charging for it, in my opinion, if you've played most of the games, and PS Plus Premium wasn't worth it at the cheaper price, so it's definitely not worth it at the more expensive price. So this time around, Microsoft has been buying up studios. We know all about this, but the news was talking about the Activision acquisition as if it was all about Activision, and it turns out the real focus for Microsoft was King. They wanted a mobile platform that they didn't have to build from the ground up, so they went in and they bought one of the biggest ones out there. They make a ton of money off of casual players because a lot of casual players play games on their phone and spend the vast majority of their paycheck. Like I was trying to find a racing game to play at the gym on the treadmill, and I was looking through every free to play mobile game that's in the racing genre. The first review is like 1 star and it says I had to spend like $500 to remain competitive in this game, and they're mad at the game, but it's like, bro, you spent $500 on a mobile game. Reassess your entire life. And they're not the only big competitor in the space. Take-Two, the owners of Grand Theft Auto's developers, Rockstar Games, they also own Zynga, who owns a bunch of other big mobile games. So it's a big untapped market that Sony's been kind of doing their best to avoid in focusing on PlayStation. But now, because Xbox owns one of the biggest competitors in the mobile space, Sony's got this fire lit under their ass trying to make sure that they have at least some competition ready to go, because right now they have one mobile game that generates any income. It's like a free-to-play gacha style Japanese anime game that I will never play in my entire life. And the reason people have figured out that they're investing in this going forward is they are hiring aggressively for it. They're trying to find an engineer who can build a mobile platform, because that's where things are going. Xbox is going to be launching an Xbox mobile store on iOS and Android, where you'll download the store, and within that store you'll be able to purchase games outside of Apple's App Store. It'll all go to Microsoft, and I'm assuming any sales that they make within that app, a percentage will be cut off the top and then delivered to Apple or Google, but the vast majority of the income is going to go to Microsoft. They won a bunch of legal cases overseas, I guess, that allowed this to happen. I don't know if this is going to launch in the US because a lot of these cases, again, were in Europe. So things like being able to download these extra stores, you can only do that in Europe right now on the iPhone. They're not bringing it here, but still, that's a huge market for Microsoft to be able to launch a store and then sell games that they own the IP for, which you'll probably know they own the IP for a lot of games these days. And of course, if this takes off, you can see Take-Two doing the same thing with Zynga, and then Netflix is doing the same thing right now, where if you have a Netflix subscription through the Netflix app, you can download a better version of the GTA San Andreas remaster that came out and was horrible a few years ago. So all of that is to say that Sony's kind of backed into a corner here and they need to develop their own mobile platform. That's exactly what they're hiring for, and they're going for free-to-play games. I was hoping that they would go for, transitioning some of their biggest titles over to mobile. They have the backbone attachment controller that allows you to use a controller on your phone, and it has PlayStation face buttons and looks like a DualSense. I think that's pretty cool. I'm not going to whip that thing out at all to play free-to-play mobile games because I'm not spending money on this crap. It's like it never ends. You can't just buy the game anymore. You have to download it for free and just sink endless amounts of money into it, and it sucks. Thankfully, all this is happening when the emulation floodgates have completely opened. The RetroArch app on iOS is awesome for PlayStation games. I've been playing Burnout Legends, the old PSP game that I absolutely loved, on my iPhone with that backbone controller. I'm not going to main that device as my emulation station because the Steam Deck is that much better at doing the same thing, but it is really cool that now, instead of playing these free-to-play mobile games, you can play the PlayStation Classics library completely for free because Sony isn't giving us a way to do it. Honestly, if they were smart, this mobile platform would be a classic game store where they could sell PS1, 2, PSP games, and even Vita games to play on your phone with a controller, but no, they want to go the free-to-play route because games like Monopoly Go are earning billions and billions of dollars. The mobile market, the amount of money it makes, the amount of money that console games make isn't even on the graph compared to what some of these mobile games make. So obviously, that's another huge reason why they want to invest in this. But speaking of the future, that brings us to the second news story here, which is all about Sony's business update. This wasn't just PlayStation, it was the entire company of Sony. I stayed up and watched it. It was at 9:30, and PlayStation was just a blip on the whole map of what they were talking about. They did say that they used machine learning for Spider-Man 2's development, and that really helped. They said they're really happy with where the PS5 is at, and they expect it to continue to grow, which is great. But then they talked about how in the future, physical and digital libraries and lifestyles are all going to merge, and they showed this weird controller that kind of looks like if you took a DualSense or a PlayStation Portal and mixed it with something like the Wave controller that we almost got for the PlayStation 3. That one that looked like a crescent moon that was silver polished and never released with the actual console. That's exactly what this controller looks like, but there's a glass screen in the middle that's projecting in the mid-air, a screen in front of the person, and I don't think this is ever going to happen because there's so many weird things you'd have to consider there. Having a see-through screen sounds cool because it was in a bunch of movies like Minority Report and all that stuff growing up that I had, but then when you think about it, it wouldn't be usable outdoors where the person is actually using the controller. You'd be seen through the screen onto the ground. They'd have to figure out a way to make a projector that could project into mid-air and not be see-through. I'm sure that could happen with some crazy startup or something like that, but it's not really where I want to see Sony investing their money and resources. It's cool tech, but what we have now works just fine. And the whole idea of merging physical and digital, it kind of just seems like they're kind of going towards that future where everything's going to be digital and we'll own nothing. That classic meme, you'll own nothing and be happy. That's not me. I will not own nothing and be happy. I will just quit video games at that point. I'm not going to be playing stuff that's on a cloud and has latency and breaks down when it's streaming from the cloud and is full of microtransactions and can disappear like we're already seeing with games like The Crew, which is extra crazy because people data mined The Crew and found an offline mode that developers had access to. So even though Ubisoft was going all around town saying that this game had to be all online because it was an MMO, it turns out that the vast majority of the game is computed on your computer or PlayStation, and you could just play it offline, but they don't want the game out there because for reasons, I guess. They say they took it down because of licensing issues with music and cars, which I guess I understand, but they should have read the tea leaves and read the future and said, hey, you know, when we're making the licensing deals for all these cars and songs, it would be really cool if this game we sold for $60 could be played offline at one point. So we might want to pay a little bit more to get licensing rights that also extend to this game going offline and being able to be played offline. But nope, that's not going to happen. And now you're already seeing that effect, that chilling effect that they created with this situation with the Crew 1. It's affecting the Crew 2 and the Crew Motorfest. I saw there's like 600 reviews for the Crew Motorfest on Steam, which sucks because it's a really fun game. And the reviews for the Crew 2 were very positive for the longest time on Steam. But now they're careening down into the mixed valley, and I'm assuming that they'll be very negative within, you know, just a matter of weeks because people are pissed off about this, and rightfully so. The cool thing about Sony is when they plan ahead, it usually doesn't work out for them. They're a very reactive company, as we're talking about earlier in this video. They're reacting to Microsoft with Game Pass. They're reacting to Microsoft getting one of the biggest mobile publishers in the entire industry. You know, they plan ahead. They can do that all they want. But when push comes to shove, what they end up doing 9 times out of 10 is either reacting to the industry and making a higher quality product, or, you know, they fail miserably like they did with, I don't know, this is a deep cut, Wonder Book back in the day, where it was like that Harry Potter book you could play with PlayStation Move, and it absolutely sucked. Still, it is nice to see them kind of visualizing where they think the future is going to be. The machine learning thing I think is cool because it's not quite AI, and anything that can streamline development work that's not creative, I think I'm fine with, just because it'll mean getting games quicker at the end of the day. That's the biggest thing I think needs to be solved outside of game budgets exploding like crazy. Those are the two biggest things, making sure games come out quicker and making sure games aren't just big bloated messes that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, because as we're seeing in the world of Hollywood right now, that's a losing game. That's not going to work out for anyone in a cool way. But yeah, speaking of Hollywood, Neil Druckmann is back in the news lately, and it's again not for a great reason. He's been doing some interviews. He was talking about Naughty Dog's next game, which really does sound like a new IP, which is immediately interesting to me, right? Like, I want to see some new stuff from Naughty Dog. I like The Last of Us. I'm personally getting kind of sick of it. I like zombie games that focus on the zombies now. I don't really care about the little drama that they've created in that world. And, you know, the more I think about The Last of Us Part 2's story, the less I think there's really much of a place to go with it. So yeah, I want to see what they can do that's different than The Last of Us. But when he was talking about this, he basically said that he wants this game to show people in the mainstream that gaming has something to offer, and that it might bring it up to the level of Hollywood. And this is something that Neil Druckmann constantly loves talking about, right? He's very Hideo Kojima-like, where he's a game maker who clearly wants to direct movies and just stays in the gaming world, and is just obsessed with this idea of quote unquote bringing gaming up to the level of Hollywood. But me, someone who loves movies and loves video games, I think they're both pretty much equal in different lanes, right? Like, they don't need to be the same thing. And if you do the raw math, video games make way more money than movies these days. People play more video games than they generally watch movies or TV shows. So to me, that clearly shows that gaming has won, and I don't understand why we're chasing like mainstream respect. If you want an Oscar for your video game, I think that's a completely stupid goal. Again, I love movies. I have a movie channel all about the Halloween franchise, and I could not care less about any movie I like winning an Oscar. That whole thing's a joke. I don't watch it. I don't care what celebrities think. I don't care what celebrities think are the best movies out there. And honestly, I think they've been making bad movies for around the past decade, and I want to see a major change in Hollywood, and chasing that carrot is just a dumb idea for video games as a whole. You don't need to do it, and when you do that, you get games like Hellblade 2, which are just basically playable movies, and you know who's not playing Hellblade 2? People who watch movies. No one really gives a shit. They're kind of on the clock here. We know that they're splitting The Last of Us Part 2 into multiple seasons of the TV show. I think that's fine. It doesn't feel like Final Fantasy VII being split into 3 games, for example. It feels like a justified move because you're following so many different characters through such a long story in The Last of Us Part 2. But yeah, either way, they're going to have to make The Last of Us Part 3 before the show, because we don't want a situation like Game of Thrones where, you know, the last season came out before the actual book that it's based on. We don't want that happening with The Last of Us. I don't want to know what's going to happen in The Last of Us Part 3 via a TV show, because again, as someone who loves both video games and movies and TV shows, I think The Last of Us games are far and away better than what we got out of the TV show. I think the TV show is good, but I don't think it's anywhere close to what we got out of the games. But yeah, that brings us to the fourth and final news story I have in this weekend update for you guys. Bill Kuhn, who's a verified leaker in the world of PlayStation, he's leaked a ton of stuff out there, like game release dates, console release dates, everything like that. He's now telling us that the game that we can expect to see from PlayStation as an exclusive in 2024 is Conquered. This game is being developed by Firewalk Studios. It's one of those fabled live service games that Jim Ryan announced. We don't know what this game is, right? Like, we saw that reveal trailer, which is a spaceship. We've heard that it has a tone similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, which sounds cool, and I am curious about it. I want to see what Sony can do in this live service space, but as someone who's put 1,000 hours into Destiny, I played a lot of the Crew Motorfest, I play a lot of Diablo 4, I'm getting kind of worn out on the full-time job games. I'd rather play stuff like Elden Ring, which I've been playing with my brother right now. I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima. I've been playing Need for Speed Unbound, which has an online component, but it's mainly PvP, and that game actually does have a really good campaign mode. I'm majorly shifting back towards that, whereas most of the PS4 generation, I was heavily into online games and live service stuff. It feels like a little bit too little too late, but again, I'm curious to see what Firewalk Studios can do, because if they're a fully owned studio by Sony, which Firewalk is, I want to know what they're going to do, and I want it to be good. I want them to thrive under Sony, because I don't want to see any more studios shut down. So even though another live service game isn't necessarily what I want the most right now, it's something that I'll deal with it's something that I will at least try out, because again, it's a Sony first party studio game. The real story here is that showcase has got to be happening right around the corner. I saw Jeff Grubb having a meltdown on Twitter because so many people are asking him about it. May is closing up shop very soon. We have one more week in May. I'm hoping that we get the announcement this week. Like, if it might have already happened by the time you see this video, because I'm recording it Thursday and it's going up Saturday, but Friday is where I think Sony would announce it for the week following, which is really the end of May and the only time they can do it. And if it doesn't happen at the end of May, I'm assuming it'll happen within the first 2 weeks of June, but Xbox and everyone else like Summer Game Fest have their showcases coming up, so the clock is really ticking for Sony to show us some brand new stuff. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.